also. You can also broadcast.
No,
All right,
we've
we're
talked
live.
about this every time. I'm on video. I'm on mobile,
Oh
so
yeah.
I know how to do that.
Okay,
Um,
so we were talking about the future of AI, and maybe we've been misunderestimating it.
yeah, so I wanted to give an opportunity for this contrarian thesis that came to me in the
Yeah,
last 24 hours and hear you. So
throw it out.
I think you just put yourself on mute. I think that the AI revolution is totally overblown. And this is why. It feels to me very similar to how the carriers, AT&T, whatever was Verizon, Metro PCS, or whatever, spoke about video conferencing in the late 80s and early 90s. You just made me really small. Okay, there we go. Um, I don't think it's actually very important. Like AI for me is a relational database sort of thing where the profit of the relational database didn't really go to the people that invented the database. It went for the people who deployed them. And I actually think that a lot of the profit taking in AI is already happening. So my contrarian thesis is that the reason why we're talking about AI is because anyone can go on ChatGPT and can, do whatever they need to do to see like a haiku or a poem or put in like a basic essay. And so they say, oh wow, this is amazing. It's going to take over everything. I don't think so. I think actually AI is hiding a much bigger and more important industry, which we'll talk to in a second. And I just wanted to talk briefly about the profit. So we're deploying hundreds of billions of dollars in capex into AI data centers and high density racks and all this kind of thing. When I was on Instagram last night, I got into some weird loop where I was only seeing ads. And I would say 8 out of 10 ads that I was seeing in Reels were ads that I wanted to purchase. Like they were across all the categories: clothing, accessories, travel, food.
I've
Just
also been seeing better ads. I don't know.
complete.
You,
Yes, the ads are better. They're better targeted. I was saving them. I do like a bookmark now, so I always do like a tear sheet as a marketer of ads that I like. But now I was doing a tear sheet of ads where I wanted to purchase, and I actually do go back and I purchase them. Right, so I tried, the Prima bars. I tried the pretzels. I tried the Rise coffee. I tried all of that kind of stuff. Like Instagram's algorithm, which I know is informed by their artificial intelligence work and machine learning work, is fantastic at showing the ads. And so I think that the profits that we're seeing in the Mag 7 that are leading to their market caps are actually them monetizing AI today. I don't think that the future is AI
some people
driven.
think it's just cost cutting. Also, I mean, they're also laying off expensive engineers. To
Well,
replace
so
them.
that's been a thing. The NAFTAization of technology has been a thesis since 2020. So just to back up, when women entered the workforce, part of the deal between big business and the government was that big business was going to be a sink for labor, right? They have all these non-productive people entering the workforce. HR didn't exist before the 1970s, as an example. And so the government would say, okay, you hire all these people, they're non-productive, and we're going to give you breaks at the government level on how to do that. So we've seen every industry that hires these people: education, administration, which is government, healthcare. Their productivity has increased due to technology at the periphery, but for the most part, their overall like cost and market share of the GDP has gone up because it's all labor and regulations, but they're not actually doing anything. And
Yeah,
companies,
so just to be clear, there's plenty of women lawyers and marketers and all these that are doing very good jobs and much better than men.
yeah,
For
sure. That's
example, our
like,
Attorney General Pam Bondi,
yeah, exactly. So this
or the
is like
first lawyer for Spotify was a woman, and she really kicked butt there.
yeah, sure. But the point is like we're talking about a population level statistics, not individuals. And if you look at the increase in administrators in schools, they're not increasing educational outcomes, and they're disproportionately women, right? So I'm just talking about a social contract that was created between labor and capital via the government starting in the 70s. And so what happened was in COVID, the companies in the US, the technology companies, decided that they were going to just start jettisoning these non-productive employees as sort of like it was like a treasury, if you will, of people that didn't do anything, which is why you saw all those day in the life of videos of a product manager, of a marketer, of whatever it was, where it wasn't really clear what they were doing. And so, like, that was to an extent an information operation to justify firing all these people, the NAFTAization of these working class, this working group. And we're going through that cycle now where all these companies are going to be eliminating these non-productive positions. But the big trend that's super important that everyone is missing is humanoid robots. Um, the humanoid robots is being obscured by AI right now because we can all use ChatGPT. But humanoid robots is actually going to fundamentally change the entire economy and our work life situation in a way that I don't believe anyone is accounting for right now. I think it's not even a conceivable
Yeah,
thing.
but people aren't accounting for it because it's not ready.
No.
We just
You
don't
can
have.
do
They don't
you can
work.
do teleoperated pick and place is 100% ready,
Okay. Picking
right? So
place. It's what, like a few 100,000 jobs.
in the United States, there are 8 million people, and 30 to 40% of their time is in pick and place jobs. And what a pick and place job is
There are
either there's a
millions in pick and place jobs.
yes, millions of hours. So it's not 100%
Millions
pick
of
and place.
hours is different. It's just
No,
thousands.
there's 8 million people where 30 to 40, you can go look it up on Grok or ChatGPT or Deep
That's a
Research
lot.
or whatever. I, I understand, but I'm explaining to you. I did this research for a client that has these robotic arms that they're trying to sell, and I'm just trying to explain to you what I learned. There are millions of Americans where 30-40% of their um, 30-40% of their time is doing pick and place. And pick and place is you have a continuous line in a factory, so you pick up an item and you put it in a box, or you see a grid of boxes and you take one item from one part of the grid and you put it in another. Those jobs are roughly $36 an hour, fully capitalized. So the FTE cost of that person. So when you look them up on Indeed or Glassdoor or whatever, it's $24 to $27. And then when you factor in costs like unemployment insurance and healthcare and all this kind of thing, it gets to $36. Today, if you assume that you have a robotic arm that's teleoperated via Starlink or something else, you can charge $5 an hour for somebody in Bangladesh to do that pick and place on a capex investment of, let's say, $7 an hour, right? And $7 an hour times 20,000 hours is $140,000. So you can deploy $140,000 of capex to replace that person's 40% of what they're doing at $36 an hour with something that's $12 an hour. And this is exactly what we saw Tesla showcase at the Optimus robot, whatever, where you had all these guys doing bartending, which was, again, teleoperated bots. And if you think about the training, so you look at full self-driving, people have to monitor the car driving. You can't monitor a robot doing work when you're standing right next to it. The only way to monitor it, so to speak, is to have an army of humans teleoperating the bot and then using that training data that you generate to create synthetic data and then using that for the bots to ultimately get better, just like with full self-driving. So the rate of improvement for very basic, and pick and place is very basic, right? You have batteries coming off a continuous conveyor belt line. You're going to pick them up and you're going to put them into a 16 by 16 cell.
But so it goes from 36 to $13 an hour. Is that this is a bit of cost savings on a couple
Yeah.
million jobs? That
Yes.
doesn't matter that much?
Right. So here's the issue. When you go around the world and you see that you go to like anywhere in Latin America, the infrastructure is visibly worse. The issue with the infrastructure is not that Latin American countries don't have robust economies. Probably got to go on mute because of the background noise. The issue is not that Latin American countries don't have robust economies that can't afford better infrastructure. The issue is lack of labor. And so you are going to see these humanoid robot armies that are either going to be created locally or going to be rented out. They show up on a boat with 10,000 bots and they're going to build everything. They're going to build warehouses, they're going to build roads, they're going to build water infrastructure, they're going to build copper, everything, right? And the limiting factor on infrastructure improvement for 90% of the world is labor availability. Like you can't build those beautiful buildings in New York City, in Dubai, in Singapore
Yeah.
without very specialized construction workers. Those construction workers are going to get displaced at the low end first, but eventually the high end by humanoid robots. And so now you are not going to be constrained by labor availability. It's not a capex question, it's a labor availability question. And then the other thing that's totally crazy about humanoid robots is that when we think about replacing human beings um, in the factory, you think about you like video a factory and you show the humans working alongside the robots and alongside very expensive from a capex perspective single purpose machines that do a particular function. The issue is that small automated machines today, because they have a quality component to them, it's not work that's done by humans, but it could be done by humans. And so you're going to see the factory is going to reorganize where the human work that's going to be done by humanoid robots is actually going to expand into specialist machines that we have deployed now, because the humanoid robots can maintain that quality level over and over and over and over again. And so the the capital expenditure of the way the factory is organized is going to shift. Now, is it going to be 20%? Is it going to be 30%? I don't really know because nobody really knows. But the
But the
implications
humanoid
of that,
robots aren't there to replace. Like they barely last year started doing this. They, they barely can walk as of
I
last year.
understand. But if you look at so one of the projects that I'm on is the drone and the robotics supply chain. And so as a result, we're looking at what the current state of the art is, both coming out of China and the United States and other areas of the world. And the improvement in what is possible is happening very quickly. And in terms of what is physically possible, that like we thought that with the hands, that it would take a long time, but it's actually happening much faster. They're able to do more and more complex things. They're not able to do them automatically. So I'm not saying they're going to do them automatically because you have to have all the training data. But you are going to see these tele operations that are going to reduce labor costs, and then you're going to see them start to pick off the capability. And the challenge is that when you are deploying capex for some of these industries, whether it's shipbuilding or car manufacturing or semiconductor manufacturing, the timelines that you're looking at are 5, 10 years in the future. And so when we start to look at the decisions that are being made, right? So TSMC is rebuilding in Indiana and Arizona, as an example. The decisions that Tesla and other entities are making indicate that they expect all of manufacturing to rapidly change within the next 5 years. So they're pricing in, just like how Google and Facebook were making investments in AI in the 2017, 2018, 2019 timeframe that really started to serve them in the 2021, 2022 until today timeframe in terms of harvesting the profitability there. These investments in new kinds of localized factories are very important, and it's changing. You can already see in the way that companies are deploying capital that their expectation is that it's more important to be co-located with their suppliers and co-located with their customer base than to so what we're not seeing is high-tech manufacturing moving from Shenzhen to Vietnam. We are seeing some of that, but the question that's being asked is not how do I move from one low labor cost area to another, but how am I going to co-locate my production capability, my manufacturing capability with my consumption, because the robots are going to change the calculus on labor in general because of this availability thing that we talked about.
Yeah, humanoid robots will totally change the formula. We just don't know when that technology will actually be possible and ramp up. Like first it has to be good enough and then it has to ramp up, and it's not clear when we're gonna get there.
I think we're going to be
Um,
there. I think we're going to be there with pick and place fairly quickly. And we're going to be
yeah.
there with a number of point use cases fairly quickly, like within the next 6 to 18 months. And you're going to start to see heavy impacts on manufacturing within 2 to 3 years, for sure.
It's a very fast timeline. It will take time to build the robots. It will take time to build the factories that build the robots. Like hardware is hard. That's one thing I've learned through working on hardware. Hardware is
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah,
There's a
I'm not
lot of
discounting that. I'm just saying, like, usually when I start freaking out about something, I'm 7 years before it's like a mainstream
right.
topic.
Exactly.
So you can write it down. You can write it down
It's
and be
like
like, all right,
the
Michael,
2032 thing.
Michael is not talking about AI anymore. He is focused entirely on the impact of robotics in the supply chain and manufacturing system. All right,
Well,
cool.
you might be remembering it was in 2019 or 2020 for my or 2020 21 for my I was thinking about doing a humanoid robot fund because I saw that Elon Musk was just starting Tesla Bot, and then I realized when did he start Tesla Bot? When did Elon first announce Tesla Bot?
Well, because
2021.
they
Yeah, so in
talked
20.
about it earlier than that. As soon as they made the decision to deploy their inference computer on the cars, so they moved away from Mobileye, I think he had the idea that the same exact deep learning system that they were going to use for the cars could be used for robots.
It was 2021. So I remember it was Investor Day, August, and I was finishing up my first AI fund, and I thought, oh, my next AI fund should be a humanoid robot. And I told some people about it, and everyone was like, oh, it's too far away. It's too far away. I love that you're saying it's next year because then that's like 5 years from when I was saying that we should do a
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
humanoid
yeah.
robot fund. In the
I
end,
think
like in the end, Tesla bot might be the right thing anyway. So I put my money in Tesla. But it's Figure would have been a good investment too. It seems like,
I think
or Chinese company.
my understanding about the supply chain notwithstanding, I think Tesla is in a very good position for this bet because they are moving from strength to strength. And I do think that the
Yes,
learnings, the deep
manufacturing in
learning,
particular.
what was that?
Manufacturing in particular.
Yeah, I think their idea of the product is the manufacturing system and not the actual end product is a major improvement, like an innovation, and I think that is very disruptive. And what we're starting to see in this sort of however you call it, organic industrial base is the euphemism the government uses for it, but I call it the military industrial complex. And so if you look at the shift over from, let's say, a Lockheed Martin to an Anduril, the change fundamentally is about looking at the entire production system as a product as opposed to just the weapon system itself. And why that's important is that is cross pollination from Tesla and Elon Musk's other companies. So there are people who worked at SpaceX or worked at Tesla in the 2008 to 2015 timeframe who did their thing. They learned his sort of manufacturing and business philosophy methodology, and they're starting to apply that into either adjacent sectors or other sectors. And so we're at this point, like there was just the reindustrialized conference where every single person is talking about the same thing, which is vertical integration, which is we need to be thinking about our entire manufacturing process. It's not just about capabilities and features of the edge system. And you are starting to see, due to the complexity of modern warfare that's been shown by the Ukraine conflict, you are starting to see the government be more concerned with the supply chain impact of a weapon system than with the capabilities at the edge, right? So, like, you can have the fanciest weapon system as possible at the edge. But if it requires a really long and complex supply chain of consumable parts, whether it's fuel or munitions
Also,
or
because China controls a lot of the manufacturing supply chain.
yes, that is also true, right? And so they get disrupted. But the other learnings is like, for example, one of the things in the Ukraine war that hasn't been talked about as much as it should be is the effect on degrading Russia's ability to wage war by disrupting their waterborne naval supply chains. So the big thing was the U.S. or whomever blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, right? That's very obvious. Like we can all see that that was a maritime thing, but there's less discussion of what's going on in Crimea, what's going on with the Russian ghost fleets. All of those things are very important to the Russian supply chain and supply lines. And as right now they're discussing with the Trump administration is some kind of ceasefire or whatever. The effect of disrupting the Russian maritime supply chains is driving them to the table in that conversation. And so when we think about the future of warfare, and wherever the military goes, we see commercial go a little bit later because the military is willing to spend a lot of money on things that don't work. They're very focused on reducing the supply chain and pushing it out to the edge. And so all of the next generation weapon systems are all about caching and staging equipment at the edge for months to years in advance. A unit shows up, they open a shipping container, and inside is everything they need to create a drone or create a whatever weapon system that they need.
Create factory.
Excuse me.
Create a weapon, like
yeah, it'll be like
wow.
Exactly.
Oh, that makes sense. So one of my investments, one of my top portfolio companies is Machina Labs.
Yeah.
And what they do is they build take KUKA robots, and they can actually take sheet metal and then shape it into any shape you want, and cut it, which normally you would need $1 million press to make a stainless steel object. Instead, they can do it one by one, custom each time.
Right.
And so they put the two KUKA robots into a container size system. And so they can actually now ship the whole factory in a container, and then it rolls out and deploys, and then it can manufacture on demand. It also explains why I heard from some other people that they want to make container data centers. They put a whole data center in a container and then ship it to the border. And they're kind of doing that in Ukraine as well. I heard that they are flying drones with 10-kilometer long fiber
optics. Yeah.
Crazy. Because
because of all the electronic warfare stuff.
Yeah, they jam any wireless signals. So Russia jams wireless signals. So they just send a 10-kilometer fiber optic cable.
Yeah, the longest one I think I've seen is about 30 kilometers. And what's very interesting is this is an intermediate fix because the seeker components. So when you think about a one-way drone, there's obviously like backhaul communication, but there's different components. There's the motor, there's the batteries, there's the payload, and then there's the avionics in terms of the electronic avionics. There's also a sensor on the front, which you could think of as like a smartphone camera that is for target identification and all the rest of that stuff. That technology is getting very good. And so you're getting to a point where you don't necessarily need to have the backhaul. Like we're not quite like I'm going to upload a picture of a particular person's face, tell the drone they're roughly 15 kilometers away. It shoots off and goes and finds that person. But we're pretty goddamn close to that, right? So they're doing intercepting with these things at distance at 300 kph. So it's like it's evolving very quickly and very rapidly. But I think one of the critical things that's very important for the future of manufacturing is that these drones are being put together Lego style, almost at the forward operating base. So the FOB has a couple containers, and those containers are run off of diesel generators or portable whatever. And they go and they say, okay, we need this kind of warhead, this kind of ISR capability, this kind of payload capacity on the drone, this body, and then they build them Lego style. And then they go and do the mission with them. And then they come back and they might build something slightly different. Again, out of a container at the edge of the environment. So, and what's cool about that is that the propellant and the munitions and all that kind of stuff, it's being assembled in the field. And so you don't have a situation where you have to create the propellant or the fuel in the United States, and then it gets on a boat, and then the boat gets on exits a port in Rotterdam, and then you get on a truck, and then the truck drives across Europe, and then you have this really, really long supply chain. That's not the case. The intermediate products or the input products are available at the forward operating.
Fuel? Where do you think you're pulling out of the air? What are you talking about?
They're making it in the forward operating base. So they're taking commonly available chemicals that you can get for most any industrial process, and they're using machines that are inside of containers at the edge of the network to do final assembly, but it's also intermediate assembly. So it depends on what kind of
fuel. It would be like hydrogen fuel or something.
Whatever it is. I don't want to get into specifics, but let's say you have like rocket fuel.
Or
Instead
methane.
instead of
ammonia.
making rocket fuel in Alabama and then shipping it through a long supply chain to the forward operating base, and then it
Hmm.
gets incorporated in drone, they're shipping
Hmm.
the precursors to that rocket fuel to the forward operating base and then making the rocket fuel in the forward operating base itself.
And is that much lighter than the
It greatly
precursors or something?
simplifies your supply chain because the precursors are not necessarily as energetic as the final rocket fuel. So, for example, if you have a rocket fuel that if you drop it,
Mm.
it blows up, it's a lot more difficult as
Yeah,
opposed to
that's cool.
it's in a 50-gallon drum of hydrochloric acid, right? Which is
Yeah,
like, don't matter, right? You just send it.
yeah.
So, so yeah,
I mean, that assumes you can get enough power at the forward operating base. Yeah, to get enough multiple power
yeah. Well,
there.
that's why you got all those guys trying to build those nuclear reactors in a shipping container, right?
Nuclear reactor. That's fair. Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah, it's like, but what I'm
Uh,
trying to say is that warfare has evolved this supply chain collapse, and so the same thing we're going to start to see in manufacturing, which is very cool.
it's cool. Yeah, it's really cool.
And
Yeah,
it's
so
going to
I,
be,
I
yeah,
I agree. I agree. Humanoid robots will change everything. I also agree 4 years ago that was going to happen. It seemed like it was 20 years away. It still seems like it's 20 years away. But maybe 10 years. Who knows?
I don't think it's,
Maybe seven years.
I think it's much closer than you think.
At scale, definitely not 3 years. I mean, again, maybe some tech demos. Yeah.
I
So
think
remember
Tesla
that
will,
the first demos for self driving cars were in 2000 like four. It's 20 years later.
yeah, and there's two things I would say about that. Number one is, you could say that the first demos for humanoid robots were in the 1950s. The architecture for how the quote unquote machine intelligence is implemented has fundamentally changed since the beginning. So in 2004, you basically drove a predetermined route in the real
Yes.
world with some very basic waypoint checks, right?
Yeah.
Like you'd start drive, but it would be from a pre-computed thing,
Yes.
and it would be based on a
Pretty computed.
hand-tuned set of machine
Yeah.
learning rules that were individually added. I think that what we've seen, I don't know if you've driven a Tesla recently, but what they've changed from
Every day.
11, so that
Mhm.
full self-driving 12 versus full self-driving 11, like previous versions, there's a qualitative difference from my perspective. And it
Yeah.
does feel like there's a neural net that's operating it as opposed to a human defined set of rules.
Mhm.
And I think that that neural net, the architecture for that neural net, which is the sort
I
of the
follow
factory
I
analogy.
follow this FSD tracker. It has some people submitting data,
You sent it to me in
and
Signal.
no, I sent it in this chat. Do you see the chat for StreamYard?
No, it
No.
says chat with
Okay.
everyone in the studio, but it doesn't actually say anything.
Okay.
Oh,
This
you
SSD
put it in
tracker.
comments. You put it in
In
comments.
comments, a friendly comment for everyone to see.
Yeah.
It's not really loading for me, but that tracks every version, and it has some numbers, noisy numbers, but it shows it going up quite a bit. And I do several 100 mile drives with no issues on FSD now.
We just bought a Tesla for my dad, and the FSD was good enough that he is almost ready to start using it full time. As somebody who's been
Wow.
driving for 40 years, who loves driving cars.
Yeah, this number shows the recent versions went up to maybe 500 miles before an disengagement. So
Yeah.
a critical one. Yeah, pretty amazing.
Yeah. So, but that's my point is that that learning model is going to be applied to the humanoid robots. And so while I agree with you, it's taken a very long time for us to see self-driving. I don't think that the current paradigm in the architecture of self-driving goes back to 2004. I think it goes back to Autonomy Day, which I believe was in the 2020s.
2021, for the last 4 years, they've been working on it. A lot of it was transferring the code, but also remember that the Tesla has billions of cars deployed. It's getting millions of cars. It's getting billions of miles every day, every year. And so, again, the bots are going to take a while to even get enough hardware out
Again,
there
I don't think
to
I
get
think
near that.
I think copying an architecture is a lot easier than creating it from scratch.
Uh, yeah, I think okay. Whenever it happens, humanoid robots will change quite a lot, and yeah, it'll disrupt a lot. Yeah, no one's talking about it because they think it's at least 5 years away, if not 10 or 20.
I think we're going to start seeing impact of humanoid robots in a few humanoid robot building companies like Tesla.
Like building houses or
No,
building
no, no.
factories.
Like, I think there's probably like a dozen humanoid robots inside Tesla today that are used mostly for QA that are working on the battery lines. I
Mm.
think we could see more robots deployed on the battery lines over this coming year for sure.
Mm. Yeah, I think a cool. So I think VR is complete bunkus. I think it's
Total.
never gonna become a thing, and I think the reason is because of humanoid robots are gonna make it so that if I want to build a world, it's actually gonna be more more of a pain to build it in VR. Maybe use VR to visualize the world, but what's gonna happen is you have robots just build the whole custom stage for you, and then you just be in the world smelling and feeling and touching. And it'll
Yeah,
be
I
way
think
more
VR.
realistic than VR ever could be.
Yeah, I feel to me VR feels a lot like again the 1980s Dick Tracy video conferencing watch, where everyone was like focused on VR, but the actual value of the smartphone was like way
The
more.
video conferencing watch. Yeah, yeah. We're like, yes, we like video conferencing, but you really need it on your watch.
Has literally
Like, you
anyone
want to
ever
hold up
really?
your hand like
Yeah,
this.
does anyone want to do that? No, I don't think anyone wants to do that.
Uh, you know what's a funny thing? Uh, Also, another thing to note that was anachronistic a bit. So when people went from radio to television, did we talk about this last week? I forget where I talked about this. They went from radio to television. They repeated what was happening on the
Yeah, yeah.
stage plays.
I
Yeah,
talk about that all the time. Yeah.
yeah. And so they weren't thinking, oh, let's make like a sitcom and things like that. But what's happening now is people are just hanging out, talking like you and I, like on the radio.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
regressed back. Actually, everyone loves
Well, not
podcasts where
really.
people are
The
just douchebags
idea,
talking on a microphone.
no, no, no.
Yeah,
The technology for distribution is so cheap that you and I are doing a 1930s style radio broadcast casually.
right. Oh, you're saying if other tech happens, then you and I will make like a whole sitcom, but we can't afford to do
Yeah,
a sitcom, so we're just
correct.
doing this radio show.
Exactly. It's
Okay. So
democratizing the
podcast is
technology.
literally a new medium, and we're back to the radio shows.
It's
But do you
it's
think
only
this
a
is
new
the
me.
end? Do you think this is going to continue to further? We will add more production values to this.
No, no, no. Notebook LLM shows that the next version of you and I talking is computers talking. Um, right? Like that's it. That's the terminal
No, I
phase.
disagree. No, Gen Z loves authenticity. They watch Joe Rogan, they watch podcasts, they watch this stuff because they want to see a real person that's
No, I get it.
authentic.
I totally get it.
I don't
I'm
think
not.
I don't think
I,
AI is gonna be the next stage.
no, no. Sorry. What I was trying to
Sorry.
explain is that these broadcast formats, like radio, they are to a point where you and I are casually doing a radio broadcast to one person or whatever, right? And
Yeah, we have
um,
24 viewers right now.
okay,
Welcome.
so this is a casual broadcast. So this is the same, like in 1930s, they had a very well produced show, right? And then we're just got to a point where it's democratized. We will be able to make I Love Lucy style productions, you and me,
Sitcoms.
probably in
Yeah.
some point in the future. In the
And
same,
and
and it'll
then
be
and
like,
then will people prefer that to us talking? I guess because we'll get boring eventually. So
well, so I
apparently,
don't know.
people only
I
watch
don't actually
200
know.
episodes of a podcast before they get it, and then they move on to another podcast.
Okay, so do people prefer to read nonfiction books or fiction books?
Different kinds of people prefer different kinds. I don't know
My
which one sells more
experience
overall.
has been that humans generally get more out of fiction books than nonfiction because there's a narrative structure and there's a story, and it aligns with the way that our brain works. And so my sense is that these
Fiction sales
interactions,
generally exceed nonfiction sales. So
What was that?
It says fiction sales exceed nonfiction sales.
Yeah, I mean but that just makes intuitive sense, right? Like people prefer to watch fiction movies to nonfiction movies, right? Like nobody, it's like it obviously makes
True
sense,
about movies, definitely. Yeah.
right? So the basic idea is that people prefer a
Although
produced narrative.
they love more based on a true story. If they find
Yeah,
out
yeah. Well,
it's
because they
based on
like,
a not based on a true story, they're like,
I
oh.
understand, but it's not like a court recording that someone's reading off a script where they repeat a bunch of facts. It's a narrative. People love stories. So my point was is that
Yes. People love
we will
stories. Yeah.
create stories and those will become more interesting.
Mm. You
Like
and
this,
I will tell stories about AI instead of just
yeah.
talking about
So
what
a
the
great
news
example
was.
would be, yeah. So a great example would be how you and I talked about our science fiction story of the large language model AI that becomes an organ in the body. And
Hmm.
remember we told that story about how somebody wants to create an organ so that you can talk to the computer inside your own body, and then they go to put the organ in the body and the body tries to attack it, and then they realize that there's already an organ in the body that
Hmm.
is that AI thing, and we've just lost our ability to talk to it over 1,000 generations.
Mm.
And that's the whatever gland, right?
Yeah.
Like when we talk about like your stomach has an intelligence, or
Yeah, yeah,
there's
and the Twitch founder told me that he would prefer it if there was an organ in here, right here, where the third eye would be, because it would be more connected to the brain. And his idea is to like use some of the mutation stuff we can do now to make create a third eye that can like see out.
right, right,
Because here if you put some photoreceptive cells, we can see as well, and then process and then send the signal.
right. And so the argument is that those organs already exist in the human body, but we've lost connection to ourselves by
That was part
creating
of the sci-fi. Yeah.
by trying to recreate them externally. We've lost connection to the fact that those quote unquote extrasensory organs already exist in the body today.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
that's a fun.
thalamus or the,
So
whatever.
you would want to reenact that for the next episode? We would just
So I don't know
like
what it
a
looks,
like a
I don't know what it looks like, but I
Black
do know
Mirror
that,
type of thing.
so I know that you and I could probably meet for 10 minutes to describe a high dimensional concept that we would then create with the help of machines into a narrative so that more people could watch it. Because sometimes listening to slightly autistic or whatever Aspergery guys talk about some high dimension, like it's not accessible. But I think that the computer can
Mm.
take that 5-10 minute conversation we have and create a
Yeah.
10-20 minute narrative that would be
So
very compelling.
we could even do it in an hour. We could just sit down within an hour, do that, and then create enough of a script outline that we create like a Black Mirror type episode,
Yeah,
and it's just a whole new self-contained little episode sci-fi, and then
exactly.
we post that. And it's like, hey, this is what we figured out in an hour. What do you think?
Exactly. And
I
and
love
it's
that.
just,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, so it's fun,
Okay.
it's functionally
Yeah.
democratization of the entire sort of
Decentralized
like,
TV shows.
yeah, it's democratization of that Hollywood process that can sometimes
Mm.
take 5 years, right? Where,
Mm.
like, because a lot of times they'll have an idea and
Yep.
then they have to write a script, which takes forever. And then they have to take
Yep.
that script and get it produced. And then you have to have really experienced
Do
camera op.
auditions
Yeah.
for
Yeah. And now
actors
we're
and
talking about digital, and it won't be as good, obviously.
yeah.
But the people who are having the idea that inspires the script, those people will be able to produce a lot more. So to your point again about the world's going to reduce to 500,000 people,
Yeah.
people who are having original ideas will be able to get those produced and created and then consumed in a mass market format very
Hmm.
quickly. And I think,
Yeah, they're in Austin. They were talking about building new production companies to be more right leaning as opposed to LA, which is obviously more left leaning. And they were like in Austin, they wanted to build more alternative media, like full production media.
yeah.
Kind of like what
Well,
you're saying,
if you
decentralized.
look at
Yeah.
a lot of 90s cartoons that we grew up with, they basically have the format, which is let's pick a theme, Batman or gargoyles, just hold on to me for a second, or Care Bears. And then
Okay.
the narrative structure is we're going to reinterpret all the Greek myths in the theme of Batman or in the theme of gargoyles or the theme of Care Bears. Fundamentally, like every single 90s cartoon show to me feels like that today as an adult looking back.
Not very creative. Yeah.
Like they're all
Yeah.
functionally like all these stories that we've told for thousands of years, but like with like cute teddy bears that have special powers, or with Batman, you know, blowing stuff up with the Joker or whatever. But they're all fundamentally like
Or like
retellings.
Narnia or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, I have to go
all right,
now
me too.
as well, but that's really fun. I'm glad we recorded that, and good luck on your talk.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one. Bye.